she said. "Mom, can you watch the kids for the weekend?" That weekend turned into 15 years. She never came back. I raised my 3 grandkids through scraped knees, birthdays, and Christmas mornings she never showed up for. Then one morning, she returned. Not with flowers, but with a lawyer. They said I kidnapped the children. You'd think Grandma's stories are warm, gentle tales about love and cookies, but some family drama stories don't taste sweet at all. They taste like betrayal and courtroom dust. I sat there, clutching a brown folder that held every truth she'd tried to bury. The letter she wrote, the signature she forgot, the choices that brought us here. When the judge saw it, he asked quietly, "Have they ever seen this?" And I said, "Not yet. My name is Ruth Harris, and this is where the truth begins." After she left that weekend, I kept telling myself she'd come back on Monday. Then Monday became Friday, and Friday became years. The kids kept asking, "Grandma, when's Mama coming home?" And I'd say, "Soon, baby. She'll be back soon." But deep down, I knew soon had died somewhere between a promise and a lie. I worked nights at the nursing home. 12-hour shifts, double pay on holidays. When I got home, I'd change diapers, help with homework, iron school clothes. My body was tired, but my heart refused to rest. That's what mothers do. Even when the child you raised turns her back, your love keeps standing at the door, waiting. Some nights, I'd sit by the window, the porch light on, hoping she'd see it and come home. Years passed. Birthdays came and went. Each candle I lit for her kids was also a prayer for her. A prayer she'd find her way back. People like to think Grandma's stories are soft, but they don't see the part where love hurts. They don't see the moments when you open the fridge and realize there's only enough milk for the children, not for you. They don't see the bills stacked on the counter or the letters from school calling you guardian, not mother. It's funny how life can rename you without asking. By the time the youngest turned 8, I had stopped waiting for her. I told myself, she's alive somewhere, but I'm done chasing ghosts. That's when I truly became their mother. Not by birth, but by endurance. It's one of those family drama stories that you never planned to live, but somehow it chooses you. If you've ever had to be strong for people who didn't even thank you for it, type like below or just press that button. And if you've ever been left behind and still loved anyway, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, you can hit 1, because maybe one day you'll understand. Back then, I used to take photos of the kids every Christmas. I'd mail them to her last known address, just in case. Sometimes they'd come back stamped, "Return to sender." Every time I saw that envelope, it felt like God was whispering, "Not yet, Ruth. She's not ready." One winter night, I found the oldest girl crying in her bed. She'd had a nightmare that her mother was lost in the rain. I held her close and said, "Maybe she's not lost, baby. Maybe she's just learning the hard way what home really means." I think that's the night I stopped being angry and started being empty instead, because anger burns fast. But emptiness stays. And through it all, I learned something no book ever taught me, that love without return is still love. It's not weakness, it's grace. The kind of grace that doesn't need applause, just quiet survival. Looking back now, I realize that was the moment my heart started to harden. Not from hate, but from exhaustion. When you keep giving, piece by piece, and nothing comes back, you don't even notice when you start disappearing too. That's what those grandma stories never tell you. The part where the hero grows old before she realizes she's the hero. Sometimes I wonder if my daughter ever thought of us during those years. Did she ever wake up and see 3 faces in her dreams? Or was her new life too loud for guilt to whisper? It's strange. You can forgive someone in your prayers long before you can forgive them in person. That's how I survived 15 years of silence, through whispered forgiveness that no one ever heard. So when she finally showed up with a lawyer, I didn't feel hate. I felt history repeating itself. Only this time, I wasn't the woman begging for love. I was the one holding the truth, and the truth had waited long enough. 15 years passed before I saw her face again. It was a Tuesday, the kind of quiet day that pretends it won't hurt you. I was folding laundry when the knock came. 3 short taps, sharp, familiar. When I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, standing with a man in a suit, holding a folder. Not a hug, not even a smile, just paperwork. He said, "Mrs. Harris, you've been served." The words didn't make sense at first. I thought maybe it was some kind of mistake, but the paper said it clear as daylight. Kidnapping, custody theft, emotional manipulation. I remember laughing. Not the kind of laugh that means happy, but the one that keeps you from screaming. For years, I'd prayed she was alive, and now I was praying she wasn't serious. I asked her, "You think I stole your children?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the ground, pretending to cry. That's when I saw it. A gold bracelet on her wrist. The same one she took when she left. Expensive, shiny. The kind that tells you someone's been living well while you've been surviving. My heart didn't break that day. It cracked long before. This time, it turned to stone. Because betrayal doesn't always come with anger. Sometimes it comes with a signature at the bottom of a legal document. The whole neighborhood found out within a week. People I'd known for years started looking at me differently. Whispers followed me in the grocery store. They say she kidnapped those kids. No one asked what I'd been through. No one cared that I'd sold my wedding ring to pay for their medicine. It's strange how family drama stories spread faster than the truth. People love the sound of a scandal more than the sound of sacrifice. The night before the court hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the kids' baby photos spread in front of me, and that brown folder resting on my lap. Inside, it was everything. The letters, the school forms, her handwritten note from 15 years ago. "Mama, please take care of them. I'll come back when I can." I never showed that note to anyone. I kept it like a secret between me and God. But now, it was going to be the only voice that could speak for me. I thought of every time the kids asked about her, my daughter, and how I made excuses for her mistakes. "Your mama's working hard," I'd say. But truth is, she wasn't working hard. She was just running away. And now she was back, ready to take what she abandoned. I guess that's how Grandma's stories turn into courtroom stories. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. The lines on my face were road maps of exhaustion. But my eyes were still fire. I told myself, tomorrow, I'm not walking into that courtroom as a victim. I'm walking in as proof that love survives even when loyalty dies. You ever been so tired of being misunderstood that you stopped explaining yourself? If yes, hit like below, because you already know what that silence feels like. And if you've never felt it, type 1. Maybe one day, you'll understand what it costs to love that deep. The next morning, I ironed my best dress. Not for her, not for the judge, for the children, because they needed to see that dignity doesn't bow, even when it's bruised. When I arrived at court, she was already there, sitting on the left side, whispering to her lawyer. I looked at her and thought, you wanted a fight? Then I'll show you what truth looks like when it's tired of hiding. And as I sat down, I placed that brown folder gently on the table, the same way you set down something sacred. I didn't come for revenge. I came for justice, and for the children who still called me Grandma. The courtroom smelled like coffee and fear. Every sound echoed. The shuffle of papers, the judge's gavel, the quiet sobs coming from the other side of the room. And there she was, my daughter, sitting just 10 feet away, but feeling like another world apart. I watched her twist her hands, pretending to be nervous. The lawyer whispered something in her ear, and she nodded like a student rehearsing a lie. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. It wasn't anger anymore. It was disbelief. 15 years of silence, and now I was being called a thief of the very love I had protected. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly. The judge said, "Mrs. Harris, you may present your evidence." My hands trembled a little as I reached for the brown folder. It felt heavier than ever, not because of what was inside, but because of what it meant. I opened it and placed a single letter on the desk. It was old, the edges soft from being touched too many times. The ink had faded, but the words still burned. "Mama, I can't do this anymore. Please take care of them. I'll come back when I can." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge stopped writing. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." Then I pulled out a second paper, a signed custody transfer, dated 15 years ago. Her handwriting was clear. Her signature, her choice. I looked at her and said, "You didn't lose your children, April. You left them. I just made sure they didn't lose themselves, too." She covered her face, crying, or pretending to. But I didn't look away. For years, I had protected her image in front of the children. Now, the truth had its own voice. The lawyer tried to interrupt, saying I forged it. So I pulled out the envelope she had mailed back then, the one marked "Return to Sender." Same handwriting, same postmark, same lie. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Ms. Harris," he said, "have the children ever seen this letter?" I shook my head. "No, Your Honor. They don't know their mother's words. They only know her absence." He nodded slowly, and for a moment, the room went completely still. Then came the sound of something breaking. Not glass, but illusion. You could see it on their faces. The lawyers, the spectators, even hers. The story they had built, this cruel version of me, had just collapsed under the weight of truth. It's funny how family drama stories always look one way from the outside. People love to play judge until the real judge reads the fine print. The judge turned to her and said quietly, "Ma'am, I believe you owe your mother more than an apology. You owe her your children's gratitude." Her lawyer sat back, defeated. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just exhaled, like someone who had been holding their breath for 15 years. The judge asked if I wanted to press charges for false accusation. I said no. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. As I walked out of that courtroom, the sunlight hit my face. It felt like the first real morning in years. The kids were waiting outside. My grandkids. My life. They ran to me, laughing, like nothing had happened. And maybe that's the beauty of Grandma's stories. No matter how dark the storm, there's always a hand waiting for you at the end of it. I looked back once more at the courthouse doors and thought, maybe one day, my daughter will understand that truth isn't punishment. It's freedom. When the judge hit the gavel, the sound felt like thunder rolling through my bones. Case dismissed. Just 2 words. But they carried 15 years of prayers behind them. I didn't move at first. It took a second for the weight of those words to sink in. All I could do was breathe, the kind of deep, shaking breath that feels like being reborn. My daughter buried her face in her hands. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't hear. For the first time, she had to sit in silence. The same silence I had lived in for years. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because real victory doesn't shout. It exhales. When I stepped outside the courtroom, the air smelled like rain and freedom. The sunlight hit the courthouse steps, and for a second, I thought, this is what peace sounds like. People looked at me differently that day. Not as the accused, but as the truth they almost forgot to believe in. One of the reporters tried to ask how I felt. I just said, tired, but grateful. There was no need to add more. Sometimes silence is the loudest "I love you" you can ever give yourself. On the ride home, my grandkids were waiting in the back seat, restless and hungry. The youngest one asked, "Grandma, did we win?" I smiled and said, "Baby, we didn't win. We just told the truth, and the truth doesn't lose." That's the kind of wisdom only grandma stories can hold. The kind that doesn't need heroes, only survivors. And maybe that's why people keep watching family drama stories like this. Not for revenge, but to remember that justice, when it comes, can be quiet and still feel like thunder. At home, the porch light was still on, the same one I used to keep lit for her. It flickered once when I walked past, as if saying, "Welcome back, Ruth. You made it." I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and thought about my daughter. How strange it is to love someone so deeply and still have to protect yourself from them. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate takes too much energy, and I'd already spent years being tired. The world thinks "ha-hey" means revenge, but to me, it just means release. It means the pain finally has somewhere to go. I thought about all the people who had whispered behind my back, all the friends who had stepped away when rumors grew loud. Now, they would see me not as the story they repeated, but as the truth they never asked for. And maybe, somewhere deep down, my daughter saw that too, because the truth has a way of shining even through the cracks. And no matter how many lies you stack on top of it, eventually it finds its way out, just like sunlight sneaking through broken blinds. You know, there's a moment after justice comes when your body doesn't know whether to cry or dance. So I just sat there, holding that brown folder one last time before tucking it away, not as evidence anymore, but as proof that Grace can stand in a courtroom and still keep her dignity. That night, I cooked fried chicken for the kids. They laughed. The house finally felt like home again. No shadows, no secrets, just laughter and the sound of plates clinking on the table. When I tucked them into bed, the oldest one said, "Grandma, you're stronger than superheroes." And I told her, "No, baby. I'm just a woman who refused to disappear." Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance. But this time, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like closure. That night, after the dishes were washed and the kids were asleep, I finally let myself sit down. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I stared at the brown folder sitting on the kitchen counter. For years, it had been my shield, my truth, my weapon. Now it just looked tired. Like me, I thought winning would feel different. I imagined fireworks, maybe tears of joy, but instead, it felt like nothing. Like when a storm ends, and you realize your walls are still standing, but the garden outside is gone. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was just empty. That's what family drama stories never tell you. That even when you win, you still lose something. My phone buzzed once. It was her, my daughter. A text, short and trembling. "Mama, I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I didn't know how to feel. 15 years of silence. 15 years of ache. And all it took to reopen the wound was 2 words. I typed back, "Take care of yourself." Then I deleted it. Because sometimes silence is the only reply that still has love inside it. I made a cup of tea and sat on the porch again. The night air was heavy with the smell of wet earth. It reminded me of the day I planted the roses by the mailbox. They hadn't bloomed in years, but somehow, tonight, I could see tiny buds forming in the dark. Maybe that's how healing works. You don't notice it until it's already begun. As I sat there, I thought of all the grandma stories I'd heard growing up. The ones about strong women who carried generations on their backs. Back then, I used to think they were just old wives' tales. But now I understand. They were survival manuals disguised as bedtime stories. I looked at the porch light flickering softly, and I whispered, "You did good, Ruth. You kept the promise. You raised them right." It wasn't pride. It was relief. The kind that comes after you've been holding your breath for half a lifetime. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The kids were still sleeping. I walked into the yard, barefoot, feeling the dew under my feet. There was something peaceful about that moment. No fear, no lawyers, no past chasing me. Just breath. You know, people think "ha-he" is about revenge, proving somebody wrong, making them hurt. But that's not it. Real ha-he is when you realize you don't need an audience to feel whole again, when your peace doesn't depend on anyone saying sorry. Later that day, I found the courage to open her old letters again. They were crumpled and yellowed, full of promises that never happened. I didn't cry this time. I just folded them neatly, tied them with a ribbon, and put them in a box labeled for when they ask about her. Because one day, the grandkids will want to know the truth, and I'll tell it with love, not bitterness. As I closed the box, I realized something. The story was never about losing my daughter or winning in court. It was about learning how to keep loving in a world that doesn't always love you back. And that's what turns pain into wisdom. The same way fire turns iron into steel. When night came again, I sat by the window, watching the kids sleep, their faces soft, their breathing steady. I thought, maybe this is what justice really looks like. Not the gavel, not the papers, but peace inside a quiet home. The moonlight spilled across the floor, and for the first time in forever, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel wrong. I felt seen by the universe, by myself, maybe even by her. Because in the end, even the hardest family drama stories and the longest grandma stories all lead to the same truth. That love, no matter how broken, always finds its way. Morning light came through the curtains like a whisper. For the first time in years, there was no rush, no court dates, no letters, no waiting for someone who might never come. Just the sound of the coffee maker and the quiet hum of a house finally breathing again. The kids had gone off to school. The rooms were messy, filled with laughter that still lingered in the walls. But when the door closed behind them, the silence returned. That heavy kind of silence that doesn't scare you anymore, just reminds you you're alone. I sat by the kitchen window, watching a single leaf fall from the old oak tree outside. Strange how something so small can look like freedom when you've been trapped too long. I had spent 15 years fighting for love. And now that I didn't have to fight anymore, I didn't know what to do with my hands or my heart. Winning didn't feel like joy. It felt like someone turned down the noise, and all that was left was me, standing in the middle of my own thoughts. I made a list that morning: groceries, laundry, pay the electric bill. But what I really wanted to write was learn how to live again. I've seen enough family drama stories to know that every victory carries a price. People don't talk about what comes after: the quiet, the emptiness, the echo of "what now?" that follows every win. No one tells you how to go back to ordinary when your life has been a battlefield for so long. The porch light was still flickering, like it didn't know the war was over. I kept it on anyway. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope. Old habits die slow, especially the ones built on love. Sometimes I still dream of her, my daughter. In those dreams, she's 10 again, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with crayons while I cook dinner. She laughs, and the whole room feels lighter. Then I wake up, and the space beside me is empty again. It's funny how memory can be both gift and punishment. You can't turn it off, and you can't change the ending. You just learn to hold it gently, like a wound that's healing, but still sore. I walked outside and found the roses I thought were dead starting to bloom again. Tiny buds, fragile, stubborn. It made me smile, not because of what they were, but because of what they meant. That even after neglect, after seasons of cold, something in them still believed in spring. Maybe that's what survival really is. Not bouncing back, just blooming again, quietly, when no one's watching. I remember a neighbor once said, "You're the strongest woman I know." I laughed, because strength isn't what you think it is. Strength is crying in the laundry room, so no one sees. It's getting up the next morning anyway. It's loving people who've forgotten how to love you back. That's what makes Grandma's stories so powerful. They're not about glory. They're about endurance. They remind people that love is work, and sometimes that work doesn't get applause. In the evenings, when the kids came home, the house filled with life again. Homework, laughter, noise, beautiful chaos. But when they went to bed, I'd find myself standing at the doorway, watching them sleep, whispering quiet prayers. I didn't pray for my daughter to come back anymore. I prayed for her to find herself, because I realized forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the chain that keeps you tied to their choices. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It just changes what you do with it. It lets you turn pain into purpose. One night I found an old family photo, the four of us, before she left. She looked so happy then, like a woman who still believed in her own dreams. I held the photo and thought, maybe I did too. I used to think my daughter destroyed me, but now I see she just forced me to meet the woman I was meant to become. The woman who could raise 3 children alone. The woman who could walk into a courtroom and stand tall without hate in her voice. The woman who could survive heartbreak and still choose grace. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace, because sometimes peace looks like sitting alone with your thoughts and realizing they're not screaming anymore. There's a saying my grandmother used to tell me, "Child, the wind doesn't stop blowing. You just learn to dance different." I never understood it until now. Maybe life never really calms down. Maybe we just learn how to move with it instead of against it. That night, before bed, I turned off the porch light for the first time in 15 years. Not because I gave up on her, but because I finally believed she could find her own way back. And as the house went dark, I whispered a quiet goodbye to the version of me who was always waiting. She deserved rest, When people talk about family drama stories, they think of betrayal and revenge. But real stories, the kind grandma stories are made of, are about endurance, love, and the quiet courage it takes to stay soft in a world that keeps trying to harden you. I don't know if my daughter will ever walk through that door again, but if she does, she won't find anger waiting. She'll find peace, and maybe that's the best inheritance I could ever leave behind. The porch light had been off for 3 nights when I met him. It was early morning, fog hanging low over the street, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. I was sitting outside, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, when a man walked by and stopped near my fence. He looked like he carried peace, the way some people carry pain, easily, like it belonged to him. "Morning," he said, voice calm, like water over stones. I nodded. "Morning." He noticed the brown folder sitting beside me, the one I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. "You look like someone who's finished a war," he said. I laughed softly. "More like someone who doesn't know what to do after it." He smiled. "Not the kind that fixes you, but the kind that sees you." "My name's Orion Sage," he said. Orion Sage. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of something I didn't even know I needed. He sat down across from me, on the other side of the fence, and asked, "Tell me, Ruth, what did you lose when you won?" I didn't answer right away. How do you explain that victory can still feel like loss? That when the noise stops, the silence gets louder? He didn't rush me. He just sat there, waiting, like time didn't scare him. Finally, I said, "I lost the fight, I guess. The fire. I spent so long surviving, I forgot how to live." He nodded slowly. "That's what happens when pain becomes your identity. You start thinking you need it to exist." His words landed deep, like they'd been waiting years to be heard. He picked up a leaf from the ground, turned it in his hand. "You see this?" he asked. "When it falls, it doesn't mean the tree's dying. It just means the tree's done holding on to what no longer feeds it." I looked down at my hands, calloused and lined. Maybe I'd been holding on to guilt, to anger, to the story that I was only strong because life forced me to be. For a long time, I'd been proud of my scars. But now, sitting there with Orion Sage, I realized I'd mistaken survival for healing. He looked out at the street and said, "You've already done the hard part. You loved when you weren't loved back. The next part is learning how to receive what you deserve." "Receive?" I repeated. "I don't know how to do that." He smiled. "Start small. Gratitude is the doorway to peace. Every morning, find one thing that didn't hurt. Then thank it. The quiet, the sunlight, the laughter you still have. Pain teaches survival, but gratitude teaches joy." His words reminded me of my grandmother's voice. The same gentle firmness found in those grandma stories that shape generations without needing to preach. Except this time, it wasn't a story. It was a mirror. He continued, "You've been living like a gardener who keeps watering dead plants. It's time to plant something new." That line broke something open in me. For years, I'd been tending to memories that only grew weeds. It had never crossed my mind that I could grow something else, that my story didn't have to end with my daughter's mistakes. Orion Sage looked at me. "You know, Ruth, forgiveness isn't a gift for the other person. It's a gift you stop refusing to give yourself." I thought about my daughter, about that text she'd sent. "Mama, I'm sorry." I hadn't answered because I didn't trust her apology. But maybe forgiveness didn't need to wait for her to deserve it. Maybe it just needed me to be ready. I asked, "How do you forgive someone who never really asks for it?" He leaned back and said, "By remembering that hurt people don't need punishment. They need light. If you can't light their path, at least don't block the sun. We sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't demand words, just understanding. The fog began to lift, sunlight spilling over the fence between us. Orion Sage stood up to leave, but before he did, he said something I'll never forget. Ruth, pain made you strong, but gratitude will make you free. After he left, I sat there for a long time, letting those words settle inside me. I looked at the roses again, the same ones that had just started blooming. Maybe they weren't just flowers. Maybe they were my second chance at peace. I went back inside and opened the brown folder one last time. Not to relive the pain, but to thank it, because without it, I wouldn't have known my own strength. And maybe that's the secret all these family drama stories are trying to teach. That pain isn't the end, it's the beginning of wisdom. I put the folder away, this time for good. Then I opened the kitchen window and let the morning air in. It smelled like rain and forgiveness. And for the first time in years, I whispered to myself, "Thank you, life, for not giving me what I wanted, but giving me what I needed." The next time I saw Orion Sage, it was Sunday morning. I was watering the roses, still amazed they'd survived so much neglect. He walked by, same calm step, same quiet eyes. "Morning, Ruth," he said. "Morning, Orion Sage," I replied. He looked at the roses and smiled. "You kept watering," he said, "even when you didn't see results." I laughed, softly. "It's what I do. I take care of things that don't bloom right away." He nodded. "That's why they bloom for you. You don't give up on what takes time." We sat down on the porch again. The air felt lighter that day, not because life had changed, but because I had. He asked me how I'd been sleeping. "Better," I said, "but sometimes I still wake up thinking about her." He smiled. "That's normal. Pain leaves echoes before it fades." I told him about the message my daughter had sent, the one I hadn't replied to. He thought for a moment, then said, "Do you know why it still hurts, Ruth? Because the story isn't finished. Not the story with her. The story inside you." He leaned forward. "You've forgiven her with your mind, but not with your habits. Every time you replay the past, you water the weeds again." Those words stayed with me. It wasn't anger that tied me to her. It was repetition. I kept living in old memories, like they were home, when they were really just familiar cages. He stood up, picked up a dry leaf from the porch floor, and held it to the sunlight. "See this?" he said. "It's dead, but it still catches light. You can choose to see loss, or you can see reflection. Pain doesn't have to disappear to be transformed." That line hit me like a truth I already knew, but never said out loud. The next day, he brought something, a small notebook. "Write in this every morning," he told me. "Not about what you lost, but about what's still here. Gratitude is a map, Ruth. It shows your mind where peace lives." At first, I didn't understand, but I wrote anyway. Coffee was warm today. The kids laughed at breakfast. The sun came through the kitchen window. Small things, silly things. But somehow, the more I wrote, the more real they felt. My days started feeling lighter, like life had color again. He came by again a week later and asked how the writing was going. "It feels strange," I said. "But good." He smiled. "That's because you're retraining your heart. You used to be fluent in pain. Now you're learning the language of peace." I thought about all those family drama stories people watch online, how they always end with a big twist, a loud moment of revenge or redemption. But the truth is, healing doesn't come with music. It comes quietly, through the small, boring acts of kindness we do for ourselves. One morning, I woke up and saw my daughter's name flash across my phone again. This time, I didn't freeze. I read her message. "I'm in town. Can we meet?" For a moment, I felt my heart race. Part fear, part longing. Then, I remembered what Orion Sage said. Pain doesn't have to disappear to be transformed. So I said, yes. We met at a small diner by the river. She looked older, thinner, but her eyes, they still had that spark I remembered. She sat down, nervous. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't know where to start." I smiled. "Start anywhere. We're not running on time anymore." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she started crying. "I was wrong," she said. "I thought you were trying to control me, but you were just trying to love me." And for the first time in years, I reached across the table and held her hand, not as a victim forgiving a villain, but as a mother remembering her child. Orion Sage's words echoed in my mind. Forgiveness isn't a reward for good behavior. It's the only thing strong enough to stop the pain from passing on. I didn't tell her everything. Some things are better left quiet. But I told her I was glad she came, and that was enough. We sat there until the coffee went cold, and for once, silence didn't hurt. When I got home that evening, the porch light flickered back on. Not because I turned it on, but because the timer I'd forgotten to reset came alive again. I smiled. Maybe some things don't need fixing. Maybe they just need time. That night, I wrote in the notebook again. Today the story turned a page. A few days later, I saw Orion Sage again, standing near the old oak tree. He waved and said, "You did it." I laughed. "Did what?" "You let love win twice. Once when you protected it, and again when you released it." He started to walk away, but turned back for a moment and said, "Remember, Ruth, people think healing is about the heart, but it's really about the eyes. Once you see the world differently, you never go back to pain the same way." I watched him disappear down the street. The morning air was golden, and the roses were in full bloom. And I thought to myself, maybe this is how Grandma's stories are born. Not from tragedy, but from transformation. Because every time a woman like me chooses peace over pain, she leaves behind more than memories. She leaves a map for someone else to find their way home. The morning after meeting Orion Sage, for the last time, I woke up before the alarm. The world felt different, not because anything outside had changed, but because I had. It was the kind of calm that comes after years of noise, when your mind finally stops arguing with your heart. I stood by the window and watched the sunrise. The porch light was still glowing faintly, though the sun had already taken over. I smiled. Maybe that's what life is, learning when to shine and when to rest. The roses were in full bloom now. 15 years of waiting, fighting, forgiving, and somehow they decided to bloom today. It made me think of Orion Sage's words. Pain made you strong, but gratitude will make you free. I used to believe life was about survival. Get through the day, hold it together. But now I see, survival is the first chapter, not the last. The real story begins when you stop living from fear and start living from thanks. Sometimes I still think about my daughter, not the pain, not the courtrooms, not the years we lost, but the woman she's becoming. We still don't talk every day, but when we do, it's softer. No blame, no walls, just two people learning to speak the same language again. Love, but quieter. People ask me how I managed to forgive her. The truth is, I didn't do it all at once. Forgiveness isn't a doorway you walk through. It's a path you build, step by step, with the bricks of small mercies. A smile, a message not sent in anger, a prayer whispered instead of a curse. These are the real family drama stories that no one writes about. They're not flashy. They don't go viral, but they heal the soul of every person who's ever had to love someone from a distance. When I tell my grandma stories to the kids now, I don't talk about pain or betrayal. I tell them about the power of patience, about how sometimes life breaks you open just to show you how much light can fit inside. Because here's the truth. Pain will visit everyone, but suffering? That's optional. It's the story we tell ourselves about what happened that keeps us stuck. I used to tell myself I was the victim. Now I tell myself I was the witness of how love can survive anything. Every day, I still write in that little notebook Orion Sage gave me. And every time I write, I'm grateful. I can feel the weight of the past lifting a little more. I write about the coffee that tastes better when I drink it slowly, about the laughter of my grandkids echoing down the hallway, about how my daughter's voice on the phone doesn't make me flinch anymore. That's what healing sounds like. Quiet, ordinary, sacred. You see, we all live our own family drama stories. We all carry wounds no one claps for. But if you look closely, those wounds are where grace grows. Maybe you're watching this right now, still holding on to someone who hurt you. Maybe it's been years, maybe it's fresh. But listen, the story isn't over until you let gratitude have the last word. Because when you stop asking, why me, and start whispering, thank you for teaching me, everything changes. You start to see your pain as a teacher, not a punishment, and you start to realize that what was taken from you was never greater than what was planted in you. That's how Grandma's stories like mine keep being told. Not because we're special, but because we survived long enough to pass the lesson on. If this story reminded you of someone you still love, even from afar, take a deep breath. Write their name in the comments, not to reopen pain, but to release it. That night, after I finished writing in my gratitude notebook, I sat outside one last time. The air was warm, the stars steady. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed. Slow, steady, fading. It reminded me that everything in life moves on when it's time. I thought about my daughter, about the long road we'd both walked. One paved with mistakes, the other with forgiveness. Two different journeys, one destination, peace. The roses beside the porch were glowing under the moonlight, full and alive. I used to think their thorns were what protected them. Now I realize it's their willingness to bloom anyway. That's how life feels now. Not perfect, not painless, just possible. I whispered into the night. Maybe that's enough. Maybe enough is holy. Sometimes I think about how many family drama stories end with revenge. The grand gesture, the big gotcha moment. But real life doesn't work like that. The real twist is softer. It's when you stop fighting to be right and start fighting to stay kind. I once believed strength meant silence, keeping everything together, no matter how heavy it felt. But Orion Sage helped me see. Strength isn't what keeps you standing. It's what helps you kneel, to thank life, even for the pain. Every morning, I keep writing. Not because my life is perfect, but because gratitude keeps my heart from closing again. When you live long enough, you realize that gratitude isn't just saying, thank you. It's saying, I trust this too will make sense someday. Now, when people hear my grandma's stories, they tell me, Ruth, you've lived through so much. And I smile, because I have. But not alone. Every heartbreak taught me how to listen deeper. Every mistake became a teacher dressed as pain. And every act of forgiveness built the bridge that carried me back to myself. I don't know what tomorrow holds for me or for my daughter, Maybe we'll grow closer, maybe not. But I do know this. I won't waste another day wishing life was different, because everything that broke me, shaped me, everything I lost, led me to something better. You see, life isn't made up of big miracles. It's made up of small mercies. The cup of coffee that doesn't spill, the child's laughter that comes out of nowhere, the porch light that flickers back on after years of waiting. And if you learn to notice those mercies, one day you'll realize that what you called the end was actually just a new beginning wearing old clothes. I closed my notebook, stood up, and turned off the porch light. But this time, I didn't feel darkness. I felt completion. Maybe that's what these family drama stories are all about. Not pain, not payback, but passing the wisdom forward so that the next woman sitting on her porch with a heavy heart can remember she's not alone. She's part of a long line of survivors, of mothers, of warriors disguised as ordinary women. I took a deep breath and whispered one last prayer. Not to God, not to anyone, just to life itself. Thank you for trusting me with this story, because now I see it was never just my daughter's story or mine. It was ours. It was the echo of every grandma's story that came before me, and every heart still learning how to turn wounds into wisdom. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe it's not by accident. Maybe this was the message you were meant to hear, that it's never too late to make peace with your past, never too late to thank the pain that taught you how to love. If this story found you at the right moment, take a breath. Write one line of gratitude in the comments, not for me, but for you. And if you felt even a little healing in your heart tonight, hit subscribe, because somewhere, another story like this is waiting to remind you you're not broken, you're becoming. That night, after I finished writing in my gratitude notebook, I sat outside one last time. The air was warm, the stars steady. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed, slow, steady, fading. It reminded me that everything in life moves on when it's time. I thought about my daughter, about the long road we'd both walked, one paved with mistakes, the other with forgiveness. Two different journeys, one destination, peace. The roses beside the porch were glowing under the moonlight, full and alive. I used to think their thorns were what protected them. Now I realize it's their willingness to bloom anyway. That's how life feels now. Not perfect, not painless, just possible. I whispered into the night. Maybe that's enough. Maybe enough is holy. Sometimes I think about how many family drama stories end with revenge. The grand gesture, the big gotcha moment. But real life doesn't work like that. The real twist is softer. It's when you stop fighting to be right and start fighting to stay kind. I once believed strength meant silence, keeping everything together, no matter how heavy it felt. But Orion Sage helped me see strength isn't what keeps you standing. It's what helps you kneel, to thank life, even for the pain. Every morning, I keep writing, not because my life is perfect, but because gratitude keeps my heart from closing again. When you live long enough, you realize that gratitude isn't just saying, thank you. It's saying, I trust this too will make sense someday. Now, when people hear my grandma's stories, they tell me, Ruth, you've lived through so much. And I smile because I have, but not alone. Every heartbreak taught me how to listen deeper. Every mistake became a teacher dressed as pain. And every act of forgiveness built the bridge that carried me back to myself. I don't know what tomorrow holds for me or for my daughter. Maybe we'll grow closer, maybe not. But I do know this. I won't waste another day wishing life was different, because everything that broke me, shaped me, everything I lost, led me to something better. You see, life isn't made up of big miracles. It's made up of small mercies. The cup of coffee that doesn't spill, the child's laughter that comes out of nowhere, the porch light that flickers back on after years of waiting. And if you learn to notice those mercies, one day you'll realize that what you called the end was actually just a new beginning, wearing old clothes. I closed my notebook, stood up, and turned off the porch light. But this time, I didn't feel darkness. I felt completion. Maybe that's what these family drama stories are all about. Not pain, not payback, but passing the wisdom forward, so that the next woman sitting on her porch with a heavy heart can remember, she's not alone. She's part of a long line of survivors, of mothers, of warriors disguised as ordinary women. I took a deep breath and whispered one last prayer. Not to anyone, just to life itself. Thank you for trusting me with this story, because now I see it was never just my daughter's story or mine. It was ours. It was the echo of every grandma's story that came before me, and every heart still learning how to turn wounds into wisdom. And if you're listening to this right now, maybe it's not by accident. Maybe this was the message you were meant to hear, that it's never too late to make peace with your past, never too late to thank the pain that taught you how to love. If this story found you at the right moment, take a breath. Write one line of gratitude in the comments. Not for me, but for you. And if you felt even a little healing in your heart tonight, hit subscribe. Because somewhere, another story like this is waiting to remind you, you're not broken, you're becoming.